I never learned the real name of the doorman in the Jolly Inn dance hall in Houma, Louisiana, but his friends affectionately nicknamed him Alligator, and he showed off his airbrushed fishing shirt and washboard tie with pride. Allie is a very jovial person, probably because he trades his doorman services for an unlimited supply of free beer and music every Friday night. I'm a student here at Louisiana State University studying natural resource ecology and management, and I am a storyteller. By sharing with you a little bit about the experiences of others, I'm working to humanize Louisiana's biggest challenge, coastal land loss. If you're native to Louisiana, or if you've lived here a long time, you're probably familiar with the statistics that Louisiana loses a football field of land every hour, or that in the past 80 years, we've lost 2,000 square miles of wetlands, an area equivalent to the size of Delaware. These statistics and comparisons help us understand the magnitude of coastal land loss, but the human element is removed. And it's exactly this human element that adds texture and complexity to this issue. I want to change the conversation. 2 million Louisianans make their home along the coast, and their livelihoods are threatened by the encroaching Gulf. I want to share with you some of their stories. Last year, a fellow student, Trent Andrus, and I worked on a project with the support of the Louisiana State University Ogden Honors College called Louisiana Gone, where we photographed communities all along the coast, either currently threatened by or communities that will soon be threatened by land loss. While we're both from southern Louisiana, it was our first experience witnessing life on the coast, and it was personally transformative for me and my academic pursuits. I'm currently working on a project with Dr. Michael Pasquier, a professor of religious studies here at LSU, called Coastal Voices, which is a website and a podcast series exploring the relationship between people, land, and water in Louisiana. The stories that I'll share with you today are the result of my almost 2 years of work getting to know the people living all along our coast. Trent and I met Roger Gilbo in Grand Isle, Louisiana's last inhabited barrier island. Roger is a retired diesel mechanic who's lived in Grand Isle for over 50 years and has watched the island grow and change through devastating hurricanes and the looming threat of sea level rise. He shared with us a particularly moving story about taking his young boys crabbing one morning and watching a mother porpoise toss her infant into the air over and over again to teach him to swim. Roger says that's the prettiest thing he's ever seen, and it's one of his memories that keeps him tied to the island, despite the migration of his family. Janelle Slocum grew up in a house on the coast that no longer exists. In this house, the linoleum floor wasn't actually adhered to the boards beneath it. When word came that a hurricane was approaching, Janelle would watch her parents raise their appliances on cinder blocks, and her mother and father would roll up their linoleum floor and carry it up to the attic for safekeeping. After the storm had passed, her father would coat the structure's interior with a gel that smelled of pine sol, and then scrub the mud from the floors and walls with a broom. They would then hose the house down, let it dry for a few days, and then retrieve the floor from the attic, carefully rolling it back out. Business as usual. I was amazed when Janelle told me this story, and I was awed by the resiliency and ingenuity of our coastal communities. Janet Rodas is a strong Southern Louisiana woman, passionate about the close-knit communities and bountiful fishing found all along our coast. Janet is originally from Denham Springs, about 130 miles from where she fishes on the coast. But every free weekend she can, she's in Leeville, Louisiana. Leeville is a very small coastal town. It's the last place on mainland Louisiana you pass through on the way to Port Fourchon and Grand Isle, and it's quickly eroding into the Gulf. It's a common saying there that just one more hurricane could wipe everything away. Janet witnessed the neglect of Leeville's cemeteries and public infrastructure and decided to start a nonprofit called Launch Leeville to fight for a public boat launch that had been promised but not constructed. Once she accomplished that, she moved on to advocating for coastal restoration projects and organizing a spaying and neutering program to address the area's feral cat population. There's not much grassroots political action happening in rural coastal places like Leeville, but Janet single-handedly defies that status quo. The Cajun Pecan House has been a cornerstone of the community in Cutoff, Louisiana since 1985. And like most small businesses in southern Louisiana, it's a family-run operation. Sandra Cheremy was the bakery's first employee and continues to be integral to the bakery's operations. Not only does she understand the perfect consistency to portion pralines out into individual servings, she also does the bakery's bookkeeping completely by hand, and she has a crate of over 30 notebooks under her desk, recording every transaction the Cajun Pecan House has ever made. Jennifer Schexnayder and her adorable daughter, Emmeline, are part of the family that now owns this all-female-run operation. When our conversation turned to the economic climate of the community, Jennifer was quick to turn her thoughts to the men in her family that worked in the oil and gas industry. She explained how difficult it was to function when gas prices were low and bakery orders dropped dramatically. Jennifer acknowledged one of the fundamental challenges of coastal restoration in Louisiana. Although it's widely acknowledged that oil and gas companies have done a great deal of damage to our coastal wetlands, these same companies provide unbeatable economic opportunity to the husbands, fathers, and brothers living all along our coast. And those paychecks are spent at local businesses like the Cajun Pecan House. Jennifer has seen coastal land loss affect her community firsthand, and she cares deeply about it. But how could she possibly condemn an industry that her community relies on to survive? There is a large body of scientific knowledge that has largely reached consensus on what structures should be built and mitigation measures implemented in order to combat the subsidence, erosion, and saltwater intrusion threatening communities all along our coast. It's not our understanding of coastal land building processes that limits our ability to meet this challenge. If we're serious about implementing coast-wide restoration, we need to learn to navigate the cultural and political complexities of our state. Ultimately, the stories of Louisiana's disappearing coastline are not just Louisianan stories. They are American stories. They are global stories. 40% of the world's population lives within 60 miles of a coastline. And as climate change worsens and sea levels rise, more and more of those communities will be facing the exact issues we face today. The world will look to Louisiana for inspiration, to hear the stories we tell, to learn from our victories and our failures in addressing the rising waters of the Gulf.